Lesson 29, solving literal equations. In the picture here, you can see some examples of literal equations. And you'll notice that all of them have something in common. All of them have more than one variable in the equation. And so that's what we'll be looking at today. The literal equations. It's just an equation with more than one variable. And how are we going to be solving these literal equations? Here are 3 steps that we will be using today. Step 1, locate the variable you are asked to solve for in the equation. Step 2, identify the operations on this variable and the order in which they are applied. So in other words, you use order of operations, and then you basically need to work backwards. So you never touch the coefficient in front of the variable until the very end. Then step 3, use inverse operations to undo operations and isolate the variable. So let's take a look at an example that's been done for us. Here it says solve for y. So you have 2 variables in here. We want to get y by itself. So in order to do that, we need to get this 2x away from 3y. So the opposite of a positive 2x or adding 2x is subtracting 2x. So that's what they are doing in step 1, subtracting 2x on both sides. And they end up with 3y equals 10 minus 2x. The last step is to get y by itself. So the opposite of multiplying by 3 is dividing by 3. So they're dividing by 3 here on both sides. And you can see they separated in negative 2x over 3 plus 10/3. And one reason why they're separating it and putting the x first is because this will get you used to putting a literal equation or a linear equation in y equals mx plus b for later on in the year. You could technically keep it here as 10 minus 2x over 3, but remember, you're dividing both terms by 3, and so sometimes you can reduce half of that, and so you'd want to reduce it. So the best way would be to separate the two, but it can still be correct if you didn't. Let's take a look and practice one ourselves. So solve for x when y equals negative 3x minus 5. So we need to solve for x, so get x by itself. So I'm going to write my equation. I need to get everything away from the x, but I can't touch anything with the x until the very end. So the first step is the opposite of subtracting 5 is adding 5 to both sides. So when I do that, I have y plus 5 equals a negative 3x. Now to get the x completely by itself, I divide by negative 3 because I'm multiplying originally. So to undo it, I do the opposite or the inverse, which is divide by negative 3. So I'm going to divide both terms by a negative 3. So I have an answer of x equaling a negative y over 3, or negative 1/3 y, plus a negative 5/3. And that would be what x equals. Next example, solve for n. So I have 3m plus 2n equals 8. I need to solve for n, so I don't want that 3m here. So I need to do the opposite, which is subtract 3m on both sides. When I do that, I have 2n equals 8 minus 3m. To get n by itself, divide by 2. So I'm going to divide everything by 2. And I'm left with n equals, and I'm going to put my m first. So it's going to be a negative 3/2 m plus 8 divided by 2 is 4. And so this would be my answer. You could have also had 4 minus a negative 3/2 m. That would also work. But you can see that I can simplify half of that side. So it's better to have plus 4 instead of having it 8 divided by 2. Next example. This one is done for us. So now there's variables on both sides. So simplifying it there. So here they want you to solve for p. We need to get all the p's to one side and everything else to the other. So they brought all the p's to the left. So they subtracted this p over here on both sides. So that's what they're doing in step 1. And when they combine like terms, they end up with 3p plus 2a minus 5 equals 6a. Now they don't want that 2a minus 5 there. They want to get that away from 3p. So in the next step, they're going to subtract 2a and add 5 to both sides. And when they do that, they end up with 3p equals 4a plus 5. And then the last step, to get p by itself, divide by 3 on both sides, and they end up with p equals 4a divided by 3 plus 5/3. So let's try one ourselves. So solve for r. So I'm going to get all of my r's to the left. It doesn't matter which side. I just like having my variables to the left. So I'm going to subtract 4r on both sides. And when I do that, I end up with a negative 1r plus 2s minus 7 equals a negative 4s minus 8. Now I don't want this 2s minus 7 here, so I need to subtract 2s and add 7 to both sides. So I'm going to subtract 2s and add 7. When I do that, I'm left with a negative 1r equaling a negative 6s minus 1. Then you get r completely by itself, divided by negative 1, divide everything by negative 1. Now I'm left with r equaling 6s plus 1. Now here's the tricky part. Like if you were to put everything over 1, your signs are going to look different because you're going to have a minus 6s minus 1 all over a negative 1. And so that wouldn't be the correct way of writing it because you would need to change all the signs because it really makes it positive. So our correct answer would be r equals 6s plus 1. Next one, solve for x on this one. So I want to get all my x's to the left. So to do that, I'm going to subtract this x on both sides. And I'm left with 2x plus 2y equals 8. To get 2x by itself, I subtract 2y on both sides. I end up with 2x equaling 8 minus 2y. Get x completely by itself, divide by 2. I'm left with x equaling 4 minus y. And I could have done for y equals negative y plus 4. That would still work. Next problem. Solve with a formula for a variable. So they have a formula, and we're going to solve for a certain variable. The formula of C equals 5/9 times F minus 32 expresses Celsius temperature in terms of Fahrenheit temperature. Find the Fahrenheit temperature when the Celsius temperature is 20 and then when it's 25. So first off, I'm going to put 20 in for degrees Celsius. So 20 equals 5/9 times F minus 32. Now here, there's a couple ways of doing this. If you don't want that fraction on this side here, we don't want a denominator, we can multiply this side by 9. If I multiply all this side by 9, that cancels this 9 out. But that means I got to multiply this side by 9. And so I'm going to do that, so that gives me 180 equals, and then I distribute 5 times F is 5F, 5 times 32 is 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 is 16. So 160. Now I solve for the Fahrenheit, so I add 160 to both sides. I'm left with 5F equaling 0, 14, 340. I divide by 5 on both sides. The Fahrenheit temperature would be 5 goes into 34 6 times. 5 times 6 is 30. Subtract, you get 4. Bring down to 0. 5 goes into 40 8 times. So you would have 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, if we were to do the same exact thing but put 25 in, we'll do that here. So 25 equals 5/9 times Fahrenheit minus 32. Multiply both sides by 9. That leaves me with, on the left-hand side, 9 times 5 is 45. 9 times 2 is 18. Plus 4 is 22. So 225 equals, distribute. So I still have 5F minus 160. Add 160 to both sides. Left with 5F equaling, this is 5, 6 plus 2 is 8, 1 plus 2 is 3, so 385. And I can get F by itself by dividing by 5 on both sides. So 385 divided by 5 gives us a temperature of 77 degrees Fahrenheit. So that was an example using a formula to solve for a missing variable. Next one, now you just flipped it. So now you're finding, trying to find the degrees Celsius. So we're going to do the same thing, except for we're plugging our temperature in for Fahrenheit. So I have 86 degrees Fahrenheit equals 9/5 times degrees Celsius plus 32. Again, I want to get C by itself, so I don't want this 5 in the denominator. So I'm going to multiply by 5, cancel that out. Multiply by 5 on the other side. 5 times 6 is 30. 5 times 8 is 40, plus 3 is 43, so 430. And then distribute the 9. 9 times C is 9C. 9 times 32. 9 times 2 is 18. 9 times 3 is 27, plus 1 is 28. Now I need to get 9C by itself, so the opposite of adding is subtracting. So I'll subtract 288 from both sides. When I do that, 430 minus 288 equals 142. This side just gives you 9C. Divide by 9 on both sides. When you divide by 9 on both sides, you end up with the answer of 15.7 repeating. Doing it this way, you would get a little over 17, but that actually isn't the correct answer for this one. So let's try a different method this time. I think the other method will work for this one. So if we're trying to find Fahrenheit, or actually we're trying to find Celsius, let's solve for Celsius. So if we have Fahrenheit equals 9/5 times Celsius plus 32, we first need to get Celsius by itself, but I can't do anything with the 32 yet, plus 32. So I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of, so 5/9 on both sides. And when I do that, the fraction becomes 1. So now I have 5/9 Fahrenheit equals Celsius plus 32. So now we're going to subtract 32 on both sides. So now we have 5/9 times the Fahrenheit temperature minus 32 equals a Celsius. And this is the formula that we had in our previous problem. So now let's plug in 86 in for Fahrenheit. So 86 minus 32 will give us 54. and then multiply that by 5/9. 9, I can divide a 9 out in both, and I end up with 5 times 6, which will give us our Celsius. So Celsius has to equal 30 degrees for that problem. So that one we did a little bit different method, but this one will give us the answer of 30 degrees. Next one, the formula for the circumference of a circle is C equals 2 pi r. If the circle's circumference is 24 inches, what is the radius? Leave the symbol pi in the answer. So I start with my formula, C equals 2 pi r. They told us that the circumference is 24, so I'm going to put 24 in for C. And we have to find out the radius. So we need to get the radius by itself. So when they say leave the symbol pi in your answer, don't put 3.14, just keep the symbol there. So to get r by itself, since I'm multiplying by 2 pi, I need to divide by 2 pi. And that just leaves us with r, divide this side by 2 pi, half of 24 is 12, and I just have pi on the denominator. So my radius would be 12 divided by pi inches. Next one, an application problem. The formula for the volume of a rectangular prism with length L, width W, and height H is E equals LW times H. Find the height in inches, a rectangular prism with the volume of 6 cubic feet, 12 inches wide, and the length of 24 inches. So this is in cubic feet, this is in inches, and this is in inches. They want the height in inches. So let's convert 6 cubic feet to cubic inches. So there's 12 inches in 1 foot. But I have to do that 3 times because I'm dealing with cubic units. So 6 times 12 to the third power would be 10,368. So this is cubic inches. So if I plug that in for my V, so 10,368 equals my length. My length is 24 inches. My width is 12 inches. I need to find my height. So 24 times 12 gives us 288. So 288 H equals 10,368. Divide this by 288. So 10,368 divided by 288 gives us a height of 36 inches. Another quick way to do that would be change these to feet. And you would have had 1 foot times 2 feet, and then you divide it by, so that would be 2h equals 6 cubic feet. So you divide by 2 on both sides, you get 3 feet as the height, and 3 feet as a height. Since there's 12 inches in 1 foot, that would convert to 36 inches. So it's up to you how you wanted to do that one. Here, if you use bigger numbers, you use the inches. If you want to use smaller numbers and then convert it, you could do that as well. A couple more problems. Here we have the Ramirez family is taking a trip to the coast. They live 270 miles from the coast. They want to make the trip in 4.5 hours. Use the distance formula. D, distance equals rate times time, to determine the average speed the family needs to drive. So they live 270 miles from the coast. They want to make the trip in 4.5 hours. So 270 miles, and the time is 4.5. So we would say, put that as an improper fraction. That would be 9/2. And then we need to find the rate. So the opposite of multiplying by 9/2 is dividing by 9/2 or multiplying by the reciprocal, so 2/9. So multiply both sides by 2/9. I can simplify here, divide 9 here, divide 9 here, and you get 30. So 2 times 30 would give you a rate of 60 miles per hour. That's how fast they would need to go to get there in 4.5 hours. And then our last problem. The fuel economy rating for a vehicle is determined by the formula F equals m divided by g. And the formula F is the fuel economy, m is the miles traveled, and g is the gallons of fuel. Felicia's car has a fuel rating of 28 miles per gallon. Her trip is 350 miles. How many gallons of fuel does she need? So the fuel rating has 28 miles per gallon. So I'm going to put that in for the F. The miles is 350. We want to find out the gallons. So in order to solve this one, I need to get g by itself, but I don't want the g in the denominator. So I'm going to multiply by g on this side. So now I just have 350, but I got to multiply by g over here. So now I have 28g. Now I can get g by itself by dividing by 28 on both sides. So 350 divided by 28 gives us the gallons would be 12 and a half gallons it would take for her to make that trip. So that is some work with literal equations.